Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And Salamat Datang. It's a pleasure to be here in Jakarta for this in-house training on Islamic finance and Sukuk. And I'd like to refer to Mr. Ahmad Rifki, Director of Learning Center at OJK, Mr. Ibnu Biono, the Economic Advisor at the Jakarta British Embassy, and also Dean Sukmarini, Head of the Division of International Relations and Islamic Capital Market Information. And also like to recognize and thank all the participants who are here today. It's a very impressive and a very distinguished group of participants over here from the National Sharia Board, from the Indonesian Stock Exchange, from the Ministry of Finance, from the Bank Indonesia, from the media like the Jakarta Post, and everyone. I'm sorry if I missed out anybody. But I think this is quite, as Mr. Ibnu Biono talked about, the Sukuk is quite a transformational tool that we have, as you rightly pointed out, to convert Islamic finance into something that can be both development tool that we talk about, financial inclusion, financial governance, and most importantly, economic prosperity. I'm also a part of the United Kingdom Islamic Finance Advisory Board, so I'm quite aware of the great work that the British Embassy is doing in terms of promoting Islamic finance as part of a broader prosperity and economic empowerment agenda. I work very closely, for example, with Stella Cox, and my Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Nora Colton, has been leading the whole process along with Shabir Randuri and so on. And it was a privilege to have OJK visit UAL as part of its benchmarking visit in November itself. So I'd like to get on with the program itself. I'd like to first of all say that today in this first session I'm going to be talking about the methods and objectives of the training. We are going to talk about what is Sukuk. I know that many of you are quite aware of it, but we'll get an opportunity to have a little detail. And broadly the context of what is Sukuk, how it is developing globally and in Indonesia. And we'll have an interactive session on infrastructure Sukuk, the project development Sukuk that we talked about. So first of all, the objectives and methods of training. Now, as part of the TOR, which OJK and the British Embassy have shared with me, the objectives of this training are to understand better the concept of Sukuk, to look at how Sukuk structures have developed in the global market and in Indonesia, to look particularly at the special purpose vehicle and the scheme of Sukuk issuance, to look at the challenges globally and in Indonesia Sukuk development faces, and of course opportunities, and to analyze the various structures through case studies. So the structure of the training is going to be that we're going to look first of all at the introduction to Sukuk in the first session. Second session is going to be an understanding Sukuk. Third is going to be a key features of Sukuk. And fourth is going to be on the legal and regulatory aspects, including issues of risk, ratings, and default. Now this is going to be today. Tomorrow we hope to be a lot more interactive because we have got experts in the room. And the next session we're going to be focusing on particular Sukuk models such as Ijara and Wakala. And 6 and 7 are going to be looking in fact at many of the other types of Sukuk, and finally on designing and issuing the Sukuk itself. So before we move on, I'd like to ask ourselves a question: can we call this training? Because given the fact that we have all of you who are practitioners from the OJK itself, from the Bank of Indonesia, you work with the Stock Exchange, you work with the Sharia Board, and the level therefore is going to be beginners, but also intermediate and advanced. So we are here actually in a mutual learning process. It's a bit of a refresher course for many of you who already work in the area of Sukuk. So we often refer to it as capacity development to improve what we're doing. I would call it actually a peer-to-peer learning, and I'm here to learn along with you. So these exchanges we're going to have is going to be important, and hopefully the main objective of the British Embassy is to have it as a training of trainers so that many of you can carry out training. We know that financial literacy is a problem in many countries, and I hope that each one of you will be able to carry out this kind of training. Now, let me call myself a trainer for a moment. I have certain advantages because I come from outside. I am familiar with Indonesia because I worked both in a research capacity and a professional capacity working with the UN in terms of Indonesia projects. But I do not know everything there is about Sukuk over here. So at various points of time, I'm going to rely on you to fill up the gaps, to ask the questions, and also have the answers. The added value I bring on over here is that we can have a comparative approach, look at approaches in other parts of the world, but also from an interdisciplinary perspective. As Dan rightly pointed out, I'm the director of the Center for Islamic Finance Law and Community. So you can see the relationship that we cannot look at Islamic finance alone, but we must look at it from the point of view of the legal, the economic, and most importantly, the community perspectives. So the role of the participants is going to be very important over here as equal participants in this learning exercise. And therefore, for every single session that we have, there will be an interactive or participative session where I hope there will be a really involvement from various people. You're welcome to have questions. So every session is going to be about an hour and a half, and at the end of it, we can have questions which will be answered either by myself or others in this room who are equally capable. And we're going to follow what is called a parking lot. So if there are any questions and ideas that come up over here, we're going to write it down on the sheet over there, and we can address it either during our seminars or tomorrow, because if it requires a greater handling. The general ground rules for something like this is we are all here to learn from each other. Some of the issues might be sensitive. They might be about particular policies, or they might be about particular Sharia interpretations. We are here not to solve any recurring issues that arise, but to try to just take them forward. You have your materials packed with you, as well as PowerPoint presentations. We can refer to them at various points of time. Now, what is the outcome? What do we hope to achieve from here? It's not just to have the knowledge which anyway you have access to. So the last session we're going to have as what we call an action learning session, that is tomorrow. We hope to be able to develop a strategy on what are the gaps and opportunities and how we can take it forward. I just want to add one point before we move forward, that at the end of today's session, we hope to have a feedback from you as to how we can make this much more interactive and positive. I hope that's okay. We will have questions at the end of the session, but I'm going to start off by talking about what is Sukuk. In fact, if you notice, I'm not saying what is Sukuk, what are Sukuk, because Sukuk, in fact, is a plural. Now, when you look at the large number of Islamic finance assets, products, and services, Sukuk is only one among them. But as was pointed out, it's related to many others, as we will see, and it's quite transformational. But the nature and scope of our discussion today is going to be focusing on the Sukuk, but keeping in mind the broader trends and context of Islamic finance, and in fact, the international finance structure itself. So what is Sukuk? Now, you might have heard of the word check, European word. It comes from the word sak, which is an Arabic word which is called a legal instrument, a deed, or a certificate. It's something that you hold on in your hands. In fact, as many of you are aware, this goes back 1,500 years of practice historically in part of Islamic jurisprudence and practice itself. You will see references of it in the great Islamic scholars and so on and so forth. But of course, it has evolved over a period of time. It's become a lot more contemporary, a lot more adapted to the present day context. So when we talk about Sukuk, let's think of them as either bonds, and we'll see the comparison between bond and a Sukuk in just a moment. But they're also referred to as participation securities or coupons. They call investment certificates. So essentially, Sukuk refers to the process of securitization, whereby the ownership of underlying assets is transferred to a large number of investors together. So we'll have a look at this quite closely. Now perhaps we can look at the definition of what is a Sukuk, which is issued by IOFI. And IOFI, as you probably know, is in fact quite an authoritative organization which speaks on issues of of standardization and regulation of Islamic finance system. So they say that Sukuks are certificates of equal value which represent an undivided share in the ownership of tangible assets, in usufructs and services, in the ownership of assets of particular objects or special investment activity. Now, don't worry, this is a big legal definition. We're going to break it up and have a look at it. But the things you are going to think about, the theme kind of certificates are they? What kind of ownership do they represent? What are the kind of assets, and how does the system actually work? Now, as far as the National Sharia Board is concerned, they have issued a fatwa on the same line, which explains that Islamic bonds, now the term Islamic bonds is used for convenience, they are long-term securities. That's important. There could be short-term securities also. In fact, we're going to be talking tomorrow about perpetual bonds, Sukuks. They're based importantly on Sharia principles. So they are bonds, like bonds, but based on Sharia principles. And they're issued by the issuer to the holders of Islamic bonds, and that obliges or creates a responsibility for the issuer to pay income to the holders of Islamic bonds in the form of profit sharing and repay the bond at maturity. So two things are important. One is the issuance, and then the regular revenue stream over a period of time, and finally at maturity the bond is repaid. These are just introductory phases. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Now, what is the difference between a sukuk and a bond? Now, in a bond, you only have the holder having a cash flow. Whereas in a sukuk, we will see a holder of, I'm talking about one who has a sukuk certificate, actually owns the assets. Whether it's asset based or asset backed, we'll see in a moment. So, unlike the bonds, which simply use a loan contract to create indebtedness, there are a number of Islamic contracts that are used in the sukuk, such as the lease, the sale, equity partnership, the joint venture, etc. So these are a variety of contracts which create an obligation between the issuer and the investor. When I talk about issuers, think for example about a sovereign sukuk where the issuer happens to be the government, or it can be a corporate sukuk where the issuer can be a company. And the investors really are the people who are paying the money and who are getting in turn the sukuk certificates. Now in the case of a bond, the return that you get on the money that you actually pay by a bond is interest. But of course, as we will see, and as you know, in Islamic finance, interest, riba, is haram. So how does a sukuk work? The sukuk works by having a profit element which are inbuilt into the partnership of sale, lease, or partnership. And that is what we are going to talk about, risk and profit sharing. So it is a debt instrument, a bond, but a sukuk can either be an equity or debt depending on the underlying. In the case of bond, these are tradable. So we're going to talk about secondary markets, and we're going to see that only some of the sukuks are tradable. So once you buy a sukuk, certain sukuks, like for example ijara, you will be able to trade, but others you will not be able to. Now the most important thing about sukuk happens to be that unlike a bond where you can invest for profit maximization, as far as sukuk is concerned, based on the principles of the Sharia, it has to cater to certain Sharia compliant issues. We're going to have a look at that. But most importantly, when we talk about Islamic finance, we're talking about ethical finance. We're talking about responsible finance. As you said, we're talking about green finance, we're talking about development finance, and a variety of such issues. So, we talked about Islamic contracts. So, sukuk by itself, which is based on the principle of risk sharing, can be said to be based on either debt or it can be based on equity. So, if you're talking about something that is debt-based, a variety of contracts are used to make up the sukuk structure. For example, the murabaha, the istisna, you have the ijara we talked about. Likewise, you have the musharaka or the mudaraba and the wakala and several others. So the whole idea of ownership on what combination of contracts and arrangements which lead to a hybrid Sukuk. So if you look at the global Sukuk market, you will see that Indonesia is in fact a key player and an increasing number of players. When you look at the types of Sukuk as an introduction, you can base them as either a sales agreement. So when I talk about contract, the contract is what happens to the asset and also how the revenue is generated. So what is the security, and secondly, how is the regular payments paid to the investor itself. It could be based on a sales agreement, so that could be really on the murabaha, which is the mark of sale, or istisna, which is for supply agreement, or a futures contract like Salam. It can be based on an agreement like the ijara, or it can be based on an agency agreement like a wakala, or it can be a partnership agreement, which is much more participatory, which is either the mudaraba or the musharaka. These are something that we look at much more closely tomorrow. So if you want to think about things very simply, have a look at this chart. This chart merely says that there is an issuer and a sukuk holder. So the issuer issues the bonds and the sukuk holders expect a return. So they give the money and the revenue is generated and there is a return. However, in a sukuk, what is most important is there has to be an underlying structure, by which I'm also talking about the asset. So the asset is going to be important. So unlike a bond, which can be based on financial instruments, in the case of a sukuk, it has to be based on real assets. So I showed you a very simple map before. We just had the issuer and the bond holders and talked about assets. In real life, however, we will see that many of these obligations as well as arrangements are possible only by involving an intermediary. So that is what we call an SPV, or who could be both an issuer as a trustee, and we'll have a look at this closely today, a variety of different roles. So you have the originator, who the issuer, who is the fundraiser, and you have the sukuk holders, but in practice there are a number of steps that are used, because the sukuk is in fact a very complex arrangement, not difficult. I'm sure that every one of you will understand it as better as we go along. Now in practice, remember that there is a very strong bond market. So sukuk structures are always compared to the bond market, and therefore many times the sukuk structures replicate the cash flows of conventional bonds. They are, as you know, listed on exchanges and they trade in the secondary market. That is a problematic issue because Sharia compliance is required also in the secondary market. We will look at secondary market in some detail. So they are structured to avoid riba or interest. But sometimes there are controversies because people also say that they are merely evading the prohibition when interest comes in through some other way. So we're going to look at that. But we closely follow conventional structures because ultimately we have to operate within a system. So what you have in Indonesia and most of the countries except Saudi Arabia and perhaps Sudan, you have a dual system of both the conventional and the Islamic. And one of the important principles that I'm sure the Bank of Indonesia, most of you will say, is that the effort is to create an equal playing field where bonds as well as sukuks can compete on equal footing. In some cases it might be necessary to have a certain incentives for sukuk to grow for its potential before each of them. But the whole objective is to ensure that there are halal activities and there are no riba element anywhere in the chain. So therefore regulators like the OJK look at financial transaction, not just the contract, to see whether it achieves the purpose and whether it operates the way it is intended to. So the developments that are taking place in the world today, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, is not, the objective of Islamic finance is not merely to avoid interest. That is a matter of process or just speculation. We are talking about the importance of Islamic finance, and particularly sukuks, because they relate to real economic transactions. So unlike most of the world economy, which is hardly productive but just making money out of money. You have Islamic finance using trade and investments, for example, based on profit sharing, which promote inclusion and beneficial outcomes. So what do we mean by access to finance for all people, especially those who are deprived of it, not just through microfinance. So when we use the word finance, that you talk about everybody, not just the rich people, are able to enjoy it, and beneficial outcomes for all sections of society. So based on Islamic principles such as social justice, we talked about green bonds, we talked about environment, and most importantly, the whole concept of fairness. So we create investment products and financial markets which are both ethical and sustainable. So this is just by way of an introduction to what is Sukuk. We'll follow it up a little more closely, but let's look at why we are here talking about Sukuk itself. Look at this graph, which all of you are quite familiar with. So after the financial crisis in 2007-2008, the Sukuk market, as we will discuss, suffered a challenge. But since then, it has bounced back. And what you can see is that despite a blip because of a variety of reasons, it's once again on the way up. And it is a global phenomenon. All sections of the world are in fact quite active. As you know, I'm here on behalf of the United Kingdom, that we've had a very successful Sukuk issue. We'll talk about that a little more. But just look at the map. Even though it's dominated by Malaysia for a variety of reasons, we can talk about that later, there are players both in the Gulf as well as in Asia and other parts of the world. Just a month ago, I was in Africa, where I worked as part of the United Nations. We're talking about the first Islamic finance summit over there, and Sukuk's being prepared in many countries. So new frontiers, therefore, are not just Africa, Hong Kong, and other places, but all over the world, really. So the sovereign Sukuk issues, we're going to talk about in just a moment different kinds of Sukuks. But here we're talking about sovereign Sukuk being issued by the governments. And Indonesia is very, very powerful contributor to this. This reflects the commitment and the capacity of the government of Indonesia in this regard. And another important feature of the Sukuk in Indonesia happens to be the diversity of the investors. So one of the things that you know is that the investors who want to buy the Sukuk are not merely from the Muslim countries, but in fact they are from all over the world. They're attracted not because it is Islamic, but because it is a robust and a successful financial and broader tool. And what you have is within Indonesia, those banks, Sharia banks, the Bank of Indonesia, insurance companies, pension funds, who are always looking for insurance companies, who are looking for long-term, stable and high dividends, like individual mutual funds, and so on and so forth. So both geographically, the type of investors, and of course the kind of investments are quite diverse. But at the same time, there's tremendous potential for growth. One of the materials I've shared with you in the reading pack happens to be the IDB, Islamic Development Bank, that's the IRT report of 2016, which has been co-produced by SDIMA and Thomson Reuters. They talk about exponential growth that is anticipated. So in the coming years, Indonesia is going to really move forward for a variety of reasons. Because there is a tremendous demand. We know that Sukuk issuances across the world being oversubscribed many times over, that the demand is much greater than the supply that's available. And if you look at conventional bond market, you can see that Sukuk is only a small part of it. Now, people look at what are the advantages of both. And one of the reasons why there is not yet a full understanding of how Sukuk in some ways works better than bonds is lack of information. So I'm really pleased that the British Embassy, as well as the OJK and many of these stakeholders that they're in the room, they talk about the stock exchange and Indonesia, the National Sharia Board, are all making efforts, and I must talk about the media who are here also, making efforts to contribute to the awareness of Islamic finance, because we know that but they haven't fully understood. So therefore the government's I love Sharia finance is actually making quite a lot of inroads. So why is Sukuk growing? Is it just because people are religious? No. It's because of the advantage. First of all, try to think about what Sukuk does. Sukuk transforms an asset, so like a property, and you look at assets, into future cash flows, into present day cash flows. So what would be the value or the ability or the equity in something in the future can be used today. So it releases cash. It is also based on a sizable financial demand. So we know that the world is hungry for this kind of financing. And most importantly, the different kinds of financing that is possible through the Sukuk, whether you're talking about corporate finance, whether you're talking about sovereign finance, whether you're talking about retail. And it's an opportunity for investors to diversify their investments. So they already hold other securities or bonds. Islamic finance is a very important component of that. And as I mentioned to you, that's how the world of investors looks at it, not just the Muslims, but a very strong appetite, whether it be the United States, whether it be Europe, all parts of the world. So Sukuks are both domestic, which are issued in Indonesia, aimed at whether retail or domestic market, but also global, and very successfully so. The reason why a Sukuk is so remarkable is because they're innovative Sukuk structure. The way the Sukuk market has evolved, where the IOFI says that there are 14 different types of Sukuk. They speak about this, as we will see, on the basis of the kind of contracts it's based on. But in fact, the kind of changes and innovations we're going to talk about in the coming few sessions are absolutely astounding and quite remarkable. But the reason why Sukuks are successful and people want to buy Sukuk is because of their stability. So even though during the financial crisis, the Islamic finance was also affected slightly because of its exposure to real estate, it was still remarkable because of its structure, primarily its links to assets and so on. And the returns have been very good. In fact, I'm reading material which says that Indonesia is overtaken Malaysia in terms of many of the returns and so on and so forth. Also, a big question mark over here, but Sukuk works very well, not only in the primary market, but also in the secondary market. And most importantly, and this is where all of you play a very important role, when the Sukuks are designed, issued through transparency, through good governance, then people have greater confidence in the Sukuk because of the clarity of its clearing and its settlement. Something we're going to talk about in the fourth session is going to talk about the legal and regulatory framework, it's going to talk about risk and rating, and most importantly, it's going to be talking about defaults. So the Sukuk, therefore, is competitive in the market of capital market, not just Islamic capital market, because people like the idea of it being Sharia compliant. It shows it to be ethical, responsible financing. In many ways, Indonesia has been making remarkable changes in its framework to create the kind of investment environment which is very positive and proactive, such as tax neutrality for the SPV tax incentives. You can see there's flexibility in the portfolio management, so the Sukuk fits in well with the general investment portfolios. There's a broader investment base that we've just seen, both local as well as global. And the obligation that regulatory authorities have created are of full disclosure to investors, and that creates a kind of confidence. There's a prohibition of excessive leveraging, so that is still a commonsensical approach as to what is possible. So we've seen greater transparency within tax, and there are guarantees by the government. So we're going to talk about sovereign Sukuk and why it's so successful. It's based on the economic soundness and the commitment of the government itself and its economic policies. So both in terms of the principles as well as the returns that come over there, they are guaranteed in many ways, and that enhances security for investors. So what you can see over here is both economic sense for people in terms of Sukuks, opportunities in terms of the innovative structures, where you're able to maximize your profits as well as meet social outcomes, and also enhance security for investors. Remember that investors are looking for two things. One, they're looking for profit, but more importantly, they're looking for security. It's not always driven by taking risks at any cost. So the Sukuk balances out that risk and return. We'll see in just a moment. In fact, a fundamental aspect of the Sukuk is profit and risk sharing, but it's done in a way that really is a successful model. Okay, now you know this. One of the remarkable stories about Indonesia really happens to be not that, like in some countries, it's created fantastic landmark corporate issuances or just sovereign issuances. If you look here, you will see that you have the retail Sukuk, the Sukuk Negara, which is for individual Indonesian citizens. We're going to come to that in a moment. You have Sukuk Alas, which is for the international market. And again, keep in mind that these Sukuks are issued either in the rupiah denomination, or they can be in dollar, or they can be in euro, and so on. You have the most remarkable, much talked about Sukuk, the Hajj Sukuk, which we are going to deal with in some detail. This is for Hajj on placement. And remember that this is one way that nearly more than 20% of the Indonesian budget is being actually financed by Hajis who are merely spending in cause of the Hajj, but also supporting the Indonesian economy by the money being available for infrastructure and other development. You have the domestic primary, so IFR. You have the Sukuk Negara, short-term tenor of 12 months, and then most importantly, what you spoke about also, the project-based Sukuk, where it uses government projects as underlying assets. Now all this will come together when we contrast and compare them. So if you look at the government priorities for the government of Indonesia in terms of infrastructure development, they're quite remarkable. Here is a comparative map of the infrastructure needs and priorities of the government of Indonesia compared to others, and you can see how this actually works. So the infrastructure issues that exist are water, food, energy security, support national security. We talk about national connectivity, we talk about transportation, most importantly basic infrastructure, and also public-private partnership by improving private sector roles. All this is possible in many ways by using and utilizing, you'll see the sign here of Bank Indonesia, I've taken from one of the reports, which talk about how Islamic finance is seen as very critical for infrastructure development in Indonesia itself, and Sukuk is a very important part of it. We already have important examples. For example, we talk about railway track projects, electrification, revitalization, and so on. So here there are urgent need infrastructure financing. So you identify what are the projects, you prioritize them, you coordinate with the relevant ministries, you're able to apply the criteria as well as Sharia compliance. So here you have both the economic objectives, the social objectives, alongside the Sharia compliance, and the diversification of the Sukuk structures. What really happened is that Sukuk is responding to two different things. On one hand, they're responding to the investor demand and expectation. On the other hand, they are responding to the needs of the country itself, which I'm not talking about the government, but I'm talking about the people of Indonesia. And the size of the infrastructure project is very, very ambitious, and Sukuk has been able to maximize that potential itself. So when you talk about I Love Sharia Finance Program, and you talk about the new initiatives where there's a consolidation of the state-owned banks and commercial Islamic banking, they aim primarily at ensuring that you meet the demand in terms of both its size by increasing the bank's capital base, their cost efficiency, and increase underwriting in corporate and infrastructure sectors. So I'm in fact also day after tomorrow speaking at the Red Money IFN conference on Islamic finance, where we have dozens of CEOs coming over here. Remember the important role that the banks actually play in underwriting, but also in initiating of this. And a key component of the strategy of the government of Indonesia happens to be to remove the bottlenecks, but also to create greater coherence, coordination, and cooperation among the banks in this regard. Now, I want to talk about what are the prohibitions in terms of Sharia compliance. What do you mean by Sharia compliance? We're going to talk about that in the next session. But I would like you to think about the mahasid al-Sharia. What is the purpose of Sharia itself? So the purpose of every single action that we have is based on protecting the faith, or protecting the life, protecting the intellect, and protecting the progeny or property. So you can either have technical compliance with the Sharia and say what is prohibited, or you can look at how does Islamic finance or Sukuk actually achieve the purposes of the mahasid of Sharia. So the approach that we use is what is called the mahasid index, to map what are the Sukuk products or outcomes and how do they achieve the objectives of the Sharia in terms of an Islamic, but also in terms of a cultural way of being. And you can't achieve that unless you have a clear idea of the social and development goals. So United Kingdom, along with many other governments, including Indonesia, has been supporters of what is called the Sustainable Development Goals. From 2015 to 2030, the whole world is committed to achieving a variety of goals, whether it be removal of poverty, against hunger, meaning removing hunger, whether it be well-being, health issues, whether it be education, gender equality, which I'll talk about in a moment. We talk about clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, employment, industrial innovation. We talk about sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, use of natural resources, but also political dimensions such as peace, justice, strong institutions, and partnership. Now, nothing over here is new. This part of what the government of Indonesia approaches and something that the universal consensus about. But how do we achieve these goals both at a global level and at a country level? And that is a huge challenge for Sukuk itself. So think of Sukuks in two different dimensions. Think of them, one as investors getting dividends or getting the returns on the investment that they make to Sukuk. Yes, that is our primary concern. And the same, the knock-on effect and the outcomes for the country are enormous if the Sukuk works and fulfills its potential. So the argument that is made is that if we believe in the mahasid al-Sharia as part of the Sharia compliance, then you cannot achieve any of these goals of the Sharia, whether you're talking about faith, you're talking about life, whether you're talking about the intellect, or you're talking about property, or you're talking about protection or progeny, unless you're able to address the sustainable development goals. So the methodology of achieving the mahasid al-Sharia is on one hand based on the usul al-fiqh and on the Sharia compliance, the work that the National Sharia Board does over here, but also the process of creating the goals which the countries in the world, including Indonesia, have agreed to, having targets and indicators and achieving them. And Sukuk, therefore, is an important part of that, as you rightly mentioned, as a transformational tool, not just a financial tool, but a broader tool that is available. Now, you have many examples within Indonesia itself, but I'd like to just recall some of the examples across the world that are taking place. So, in our work with our Malaysian partners, we can see that the Maybank mainly have used Sukuks in terms of primary education and financial literacy. You can think about the vaccine Sukuk in 2014, a 3-year, $500 million Sukuk, which was supported by various agencies, including the World Bank, led to the immunization important point over here. One of the things we notice about Sukuk is that investors are not minimizing small profits. They're not looking at just greed. They are prepared to settle for responsible and competitive returns if they have in their social life. So here, when you look at people, investors who want to invest in the vaccine Sukuk, they're interested, of course, getting good returns on the money, but they're also interested in what the Sukuk does for either society or for a particular part of society itself. The World Bank and the IDB, Islamic Development Bank, have in fact been quite innovative as well as proactive in creating new types of Sukuk. So, for example, the new Sukuks, which are used for reconstruction, recovery, and relief efforts. So, some of the work that I did in Indonesia was post-tsunami, was looking at, for example, how we use innovative Islamic mechanisms, whether it be the wakaf and so on, to finance and to resolve some of the problems. A country like Indonesia, which has worked in the areas of post-conflict and post-disaster reconstruction, would really benefit from innovative Sukuk financing, both in terms of bringing back prosperity to reconstruction, but also ensuring stability and so on. We already had my friend Indu talking about green Sukuk. We're talking about clean energy, which is very important. In fact, many of the contemporary trends today say that we need to be talking about sustainable urbanization. So in a few months' time, I'm part of UN Habitat efforts. We're going to be working in Quito, in Ecuador, looking at sustainable urbanization. So if you look at food security, climate change, urbanization, and you look at empowerment, it's one of the priority areas which have a knock-on effect on the world. You have the Sukuk, and of course within the Indonesia and elsewhere, you have what we call the socially responsible investment, SRI funds, which again underscore how investors need only to be thinking sensibly about the investments and the whole society actually benefits from that. So, when I talk about Islamic finance, how is it working out in various parts of the world? Why is it that the United Kingdom government was interested in Sukuk, issued Sukuk, and right now we are working with the UK government on having Sharia-compliant student loans? Why are they interested? They're interested not because it's called Sharia, it's because they understand the features of it to be ethical finance. So by ethical finance, we know that there are certain things it cannot do, and it's responsible, it's green, it's alternative finance, and it's, most importantly, it's transparent and it has social outcomes. Now think of one very troubling statistic in the world. The World Bank says that 72% of Muslims worldwide do not have a bank account. And you know this in Indonesia, that approximately 64% do not have a bank account. Why is this? It is because of Muslims' general ambivalence. They worry about putting money in banks because they're worried about the risks, what you call interest, as well as the risk factor. But we want to think about Islamic finance not as money for those who are able to make money, but as something that is an issue of financial inclusion, where it can reach people who haven't been reached before. So it means that we need to think of Islamic finance as going where conventional finance has not gone before. That is the spirit of the government of Indonesia's I Love Sharia finance program, which is about confidence building, it's about understanding, it's about removing people's doubts and concerns and so on. So prosperity has to go alongside with financial inclusion. I mean, one of the major areas that I work is gender equality. And I'm always concerned about the fact that women have a much greater difficulty generally in accessing finance, but also Islamic finance. So we need to have products, also Sukuk, where women are able to participate in equal measure, not merely as investors, entrepreneurs, as women in the industry, but at all stages and all levels, including grassroots women, including rural women. Let's not think of Sukuk as some sort of city-based money-generating thing. Let's think about rural Sukuks. Let's talk about agricultural Sukuks, which is how it's also used. So Therefore, if we have the Mahasid al-Sharia as the basis of the idea of Sharia compliance, and some of you who know a lot more about Mahasid al-Sharia know that you can prioritize on the basis of what is essential and also in terms of its ranking and so on. So with Sukuk, we are talking about phenomenal vertical growth. So the graph that you're talking about is going really up. But also think about it as a horizontal impact. Let's talk about all sections of society benefiting from that, either by design or by outcomes. And finally, therefore, for all of us in this room, in our respective capacities, whether you're part of OJK, which plays such an important role, Bank Indonesia, or the Stock Exchange National Sharia Board, or the media, or all people, the idea happens to be to understand how we need this kind of innovation. We also need the diversification to meet the objectives. We need the kind of regulation that ensures that Sukuk stays on track. One of the things we're going to talk about is the legal and regulatory framework, and most importantly, how you can meet with the financial distress and so on. I'm going to stop here because this is the first session, and the objective of the session really was to talk about what is the Sukuk and why is Sukuk important. We have a number of questions, so I'm going to open up the session one to questions and answers. And can I just remind you that there are some issues we can always write them to the board and deal with them systematically, but also that this is not going to be a one-way street. I'm not here to answer your questions. I'm here to be part of a dialogue. There might be questions that my friends from the British Embassy or my colleagues from OJK or the Stock Index or Bank Indonesia or Sharia can respond better. So let's utilize this opportunity to talk more about ourselves. But I want us to concentrate on one issue. So the government of Indonesia is interested in the Sukuk in terms of public finance, in terms of project-based finance, in terms of infrastructure finance. And I'd like you to think about and respond as to how this is working, what needs to be done to improve the climate. Okay. If you have any questions and responses or comments, you're most welcome.
Okay, thank you, Prof. My name is Rizky. I'm from OJK. You said that Sukuk is more stable than other securities. My question is, why Sukuk is more stability than other securities? Because based on your data, when the economic crisis, the Sukuk is more stable. Yeah, thank you.
Shall I take three questions and then respond to them? So I'll take three questions in a row. That's okay?
Thank you for your comprehensive presentation. Actually, my name is Reza from capital market sector. As you mentioned in your slide number 11, you mentioned that investment Sukuk are certificate of equal value representing undivided share in ownership of tangible asset. So, what about intangible asset? Thank you.
That Indonesia is under Malaysia in the global Sukuk, while we know that Indonesia has the biggest Muslim population, and you said that it's not necessarily Sukuk is religious, but it is advantageous that will make Sukuk is developing. But we know that you explained that there is a Maqasid al-Sharia. So I have an opinion. If we have an opportunity that we have the biggest population and understand what is Maqasid al-Sharia, and with the cooperation with the government and regulator, we can make Sukuk has developing very fast. But we know that we still under Malaysia in the development. Can you make an explanation? What is the factor that Malaysia can make the development of Sukuk is very fast? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to answer those three questions and then we go for another round of questions, if that's okay. First of all, why is Sukuk stable or more stable than, let's say, conventional bonds or other securities? if you look at the ratings from the Standard & Poor or Fitch ratings, both bonds as well as Sukuks are given a similar kind of ratings. Okay, so as far as they're concerned, both of them are supported by the sovereign, and both of them represent the economic soundness of the government of Indonesia. I'm here referring to sovereign Sukuks, they're both at the same level. But in terms of perception, just perception, because bonds are based on just capital flows, and if there is a credit crunch or there is some sort of financial crisis, bonds go down. Whereas the Sukuk is based on assets, and therefore people have recourse in case of defaults or incurred climate. Now that's the theory. What happened during the financial crisis was two opposite things. On one hand was that it is true that Sukuk performed better than bonds simply because of the fact that there were assets involved. But they were not asset-backed, they were asset-based. So people didn't have recourse to the asset, they had to go back to the originator. But most importantly, the problem with Islamic finance Sukuks was not so much the Sukuk itself, but because it was heavily concentrated in the area of real estate. So now when we look at the post-financial crisis, many of the stakeholders are working to remove and learn from the lessons of that period of time. So my answer to you would be that the stability of the Sukuk is because of its relationship to the assets. So we are going to look at that in a more focused manner in the coming sessions. But it's also a sense of perception. There are problems that need to actually be managed. Is that okay? As far as the issue of what is an asset, again, that follows what we have said. We have a session, we're going to talk about what is tangible assets. And one of the biggest challenges today is, if the Sukuk is going to be based on assets, then there is a shortage of good quality assets which are unencumbered, which are available, and so on and so forth. So therefore there's a lot of innovation that's going on. So you can talk about airtime Sukuks. The Hajj Sukuk is an example of where the underlying asset is not property, but it has services that's there. And there is a little bit of debate that is taking place. We're not thinking ahead of time in talking about intangibles. So I think we haven't come there as yet, but we have some examples, and I'd like you to come forward and share that a little more. The third question, thank you very much for the question. Why is it that Indonesia, the largest country in terms of Muslims, has not performed as well as Malaysia has? I think they're very different. Let's keep in mind two different things. One is quantity and the other is quality. What I'm referring to is what Indonesia has achieved over a period of time. I mean, in 2010 there were one or two setbacks in terms of Sukuk issuance. But since then, it's been quite a remarkable, a very robust performance as far as Sukuks is concerned. So what you're likely to see in the coming few years is that Indonesia is likely to overtake Malaysia. I'm not saying that market share can dramatically change in a matter of few years. That will take time. But the innovation, so an important part of why Malaysia was able to move forward was the government commitment. Under your new president, as is very obvious, and the British Embassy is also working with the president who is visiting the United Kingdom, there is a very strong sense of what Islamic finance and Sukuks can do, both for the people generally, but also for investors. And also, as you rightly pointed out, the approach is for people to understand that Mahasid al-Sharia is not simply something in the book, something that's part of jurisprudence. It's part of our everyday lives. And it doesn't even have to be seen. If you look at, for example, Indonesian culture, I mean, you don't always think this is religion. It's part of the value system. The value system happens to be to think about money, not money making money, but in terms of responsible investments, achieving reasonable but good returns and so on. So I think that the primary focus is in three different areas. On one is the role that Ojeke as well as all of you play, which is to create the framework which allows the growth of Islamic finance products, particularly the Sukuk. The second happens to be really in terms of the government commitment, and I think that's also happening. The third one is awareness. I think when the Ojeke team came in November to University of East London, we had a very what does it really mean? So I think people's understanding of how Islamic Sharia is not merely about religion, but it's about a value system, and it is not just a reward in the akhirah, but it's a world in this dunya is going to be. I'll take 3 more questions. Please.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. My name is Danu from OJK. You mentioned before that sometimes Sukuk in theory is very quite different with what Sukuk in practice. So my question is, can we still consider Sukuk in this case, which is very different with its theory, can be considered as tools for to fulfill the maqasid al-Sharia? And one of the things that you mentioned about the why Sukuk is growing is because the secondary market liquidity, but you put kind of a question mark on that. So can you elaborate more? Because what I know is most of the investors not trading their Sukuk, but they hold to maturity for their Sukuk.
Thank you very much. I'll just take 2 more questions and come back. There was a question at the back.
Thank you. I have 2 short questions. The first is, what difference between Sukuk and asset-backed securities?
Yeah.
The second is, have you ever filed Sukuk issues without SPV?
Yeah.
Because in Indonesia, the corporate law in Indonesia is not fit with the SPV. Okay.
I'll answer those 2 questions. Any one more question you have? Anybody else with a question? Yeah, please.
This is short questions. I want to ask you about the underlying asset. Is it possible for an underlying asset to be the underlying asset of 2 different Sukuks? For example, the Sukuk is issued with the underlying asset of the asset
itself, the second Sukuk, and then it's used with the usage of the Sukuk itself.
But is there any difference?
Investor demand regarding to the Sukuk, if the same underlying asset are using by 2 different Sukuk asset classes.
Thank you very much. I think I'll answer those 3 questions. So the first one happens to be, I'd like to thank my friend who says that in theory Sukuk sounds very good. How does it work in practice? What are the problems? And can it really serve as a tool for achieving the social outcomes and stability of the maqasid al-Sharia? Now this is one of the problems. At the workshop today and the various sessions we look at some of the problems of implementation. So there are 2 types of people out there. There are a number of Muslims and other non-Muslim investors who are attracted to the Sukuk because it represents a value system. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there are also unscrupulous people who are looking at only money-making objectives. So there have been different approaches to the Sukuk, but that's why OJK and many others who play a regulatory role are very important to ensure that the theory fits the actual practice. So I can answer that question more broadly, but let's look at the concrete example in the coming sessions, which will tell us. As far as the second question is concerned, which was on what is asset-backed. So as I said before, we're having one session which is going to look at just the assets, and which is going to look at the difference between asset-backed and asset-based. Yeah. And remember that when the Sukuk, and this goes to the point that you made, when we talked about Sukuk a few decades ago, the idea was that the Sukuk will be 100% asset-backed, which means that for the amount of investment we're talking about, there would be a clear, specified, determined asset. Like for example, let's say if you're talking about a Sukuk for an airport, there would be the land that's available. But over a period of time, practically that was impossible, or maybe some people decided to do more than what is available, and therefore it became asset-based. But of course, asset-based also had to be not only at the fact that there is no direct title transfer, but also because there are legal problems in terms of transferring property and buying and reselling. We'll come to that. And as far as the SPV is concerned, I fully understand the question. In fact, Indonesia is quite a remarkable example of very different approaches to the SPV as compared to anywhere else in the world. So one of the sessions that we have is going to specifically focus on SPV. So please hold your question for them. What I really like is how you're able to anticipate many of the questions. You're obviously extremely, in terms of your practice, both knowledgeable and so on and so forth. And that brings us to the question of whether an underlying asset can be part of two different sukuks. Well, remember that, first of all, something very important about a sukuk happens to be full disclosure. So you're going to talk about the nature of the sukuk. Now, what is the purpose of an asset? An asset provides security, but it also is supposed to generate returns. We call that as revenue streams. So the performance of the asset is supposed to generate these sort of periodic returns or coupons that go on, whether they be every 6 months or whatever it is. So if there is an underlying sukuk, asset that's part of two different sukuks, then obviously there's going to be a problem. Unless the question really is, can you have one property which is part of two sukuks? It could. If 50% of this property is earmarked for that. Let's talk about ground floor is part of one sukuk and the first floor is part of another sukuk. But I think the question that you raise is both ethical as well as transparency. We're going to look at how disclosing issues are effectively. Okay. Any other questions that you have? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Professor, for a very good presentation. Maybe I just want to, I think Pak Arif and Budin can argue on this as well, on why Malaysia and Indonesia is different. I think what I understand, Malaysia is developed the industry from top down, but Indonesia is from retail. And then also what I understand from the previous discussion that Malaysia is a bit more pragmatic, but Indonesia is more ideological in developing the industry. But I don't know to what extent it is true. But I think in the last 25 years, the industry has been increasing in Indonesia. It grow on its foot, but there is an encouraging news actually in the early year when the President Jokowi agreed to chair and establish the National Committee on Syariah Finance. So hopefully it will bring 10 different stakeholders in synergy in the same boat toward more exponential growth of the industry in Indonesia. And then if I look at Malaysia, I had a chance to visit Bank Negara Malaysia last month, and then I met with Malaysian Islamic Finance Promotion Center. Basically, what I learned from them is strong leaderships, because Bank Negara Malaysia is the only leader in developing the Islamic finance industry in Malaysia. But then Bank Negara Malaysia supported by so many relevant stakeholders in the governments. And the second is, I think they know the market domestically is limited, so from the very beginning they already prepare the condition to go global. So go global is also one of the factors that contribute to the expansions of Malaysian industry. But I think for Indonesia, we can explore the domestic market because it is just so huge. So for Indonesia, I think different model of development. I mean, we don't have to go global. Maybe yes, we need to have a linkage to the global to get some best practice, learning from the global practices, but with a strong orientation how to leverage the use domestic market. And on the social responsibility investment, I think maybe OJK is aware that we have a Sri Kehati index, right? I mean, that's the index in the stock market that consists of they call responsible company or the green companies. So maybe it can be a starting point to, they are a potential issuer of the green sukuk, I think, and also maybe the potential investor of the green sukuk. So basically, we have a good foundations to develop the green financing, and just a matter of time and how we can provide incentives in the policy and so on. I think that's not a question, that's like a point of view from what I have learned so far. Thank you.
No, I thought that was very, very important, and even for me, the fact how in Indonesia, it's not just top down, but it's also much more based coming up from the people. So, for example, take the retail Sukuk, or it's the biggest market in the whole world, not just by numbers, but also by how robust it is. That it's not ideological, but it is much more pragmatic. But I thought you also rightly mentioned it's about leadership, and we're not maybe talking about the leadership of your president, which is well recognized across the world. It's talking about your leadership. What Islamic finance needs is champions. The champions in all one of us who can look at Sukuk not as just a structure, as something that is a way of maximizing investment returns, but more importantly as transformational. You use that word, transformational vehicles that achieve multiple purposes, and as you rightly pointed out, also the mahasib, which is not a matter of religion, it's a value system across the world. I think we'll stop over there. We'll take a quick break for those of you who might just want to grab something, and we'll start session 2 right away. This was just an opening session. Many of the questions that you actually answered are going to come in session number 3 and session number 4. The next session is going to be how do you find out if something is Sharia compliant, and secondly, how do you choose what kind of structure you want in terms of Sukuk.